My mother uninvited my children from Christmas to make room for my sister's new boyfriend and his kids, strangers she'd never met. I didn't fight. I simply stopped paying the $340 monthly fee for the unit storing our family's entire history. By the time she noticed, the auction was over. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The call came on a Tuesday evening, right as I was wrestling with the mounting bracket of a new shelving unit in the garage. I was already physically exhausted, nursing a lingering migraine that had been throbbing behind my left eye for 3 days straight, a byproduct of the chaotic quarter end at work. My hands were covered in dust, my back ached, and I felt that specific kind of fragility where one wrong word could shatter my composure. I saw a mom flash on my phone screen and foolishly, I smiled. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered, expecting the usual check-in about the kids' wish lists or the potluck coordination for Christmas, which was only 3 weeks away. "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice raspy. "I was just thinking about you. I found those vintage ornaments Dad used to love, the ones with the little mirrored stars. I'm going to bring them over for the tree trimming on Sunday." There was a silence on the other end. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, loaded with a discomfort that instantly made the hair on my arms stand up. "Ava," she started, her tone clipped and overly bright, the way she always sounded when she was trying to sell me on a bad idea. "About Christmas, and Sunday, actually. We need to make some adjustments this year." I leaned against the cold concrete wall of the garage, closing my eyes. "Adjustments? What do you mean? I've already ordered the prime rib." "Well," she sighed, a dramatic exhalation that usually signaled she was the victim of her own decisions. "Delilah is bringing Joseph, and it turns out Joseph has 3 children from his previous marriage. They're spirited, and Joseph feels very strongly about them having a traditional family Christmas with us." "Okay," I said slowly, trying to do the math in my head. "So we'll need to set up the kids' table in the den like we did when we were little. That's fine. The boys will love having more kids around." "No, Ava, you're not listening," she snapped, her voice dropping the facade of sweetness. "Joseph's children need the space. They have a lot of gifts and they're high energy. And frankly, the house is just too small to have everyone. It's going to be chaotic enough as it is without the extra bodies." My breath hitched. "Extra bodies? Are you talking about my sons, your grandsons?" "It's just for this year," she said quickly, dismissing my shock as if I were being unreasonable. "Joseph is really important to Delilah. This is their first holiday. We have to make a good impression. There just isn't room for your boys this time. I was thinking you could do your own little Christmas at your house. Maybe we can do a FaceTime in the morning." I stood there, the cold from the wall seeping into my shirt, looking at the boxes of decorations I had just pulled down, decorations that belonged to her, which I had been storing for free in my garage because she didn't have room in her condo. The rejection hit me harder than the physical pain in my head. It wasn't just a change of plans, it was a replacement. "You're uninviting us," I whispered, the reality settling in like lead in my stomach. "You're uninviting your grandsons, who have spent every Christmas of their lives in that house, for a man Delilah met 2 months ago, and children you have never seen." "Don't be dramatic, Ava," she huffed. "It's a logistics issue. I knew you'd be difficult about this. Just handle it, okay? I have to go. Joseph is coming over for dinner to measure the dining room." She hung up. I stared at the phone, the screen going black. I didn't cry. I was too stunned to cry. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of the migraine, worse than the exhaustion. It was a complete erasure of my place in this family. But as I looked around my garage, and then thought of the climate-controlled storage unit across town that billed my credit card on the 15th of every month, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. She had chosen her new family. She had forgotten that I was the keeper of the old one. The next 3 days were a blur of mechanical motion. I went to work, I made school lunches, I signed permission slips, but inside I was hollowed out. The rejection festered. It wasn't just the Christmas dinner. It was the implication that my children and I were disposable, placeholders until something better or newer came along. My sons, 10 and 12, asked why Grandma hadn't called to ask about their wish lists yet. "She's very busy this year, guys," I told them, my voice steady, though my hands trembled as I loaded the dishwasher. "We're going to have our own special Christmas this year, just us." They seemed okay with it, resilient as always, but I wasn't. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice calling my children extra bodies. I waited for a follow-up call. Part of me, the pathetic, inner child part of me, hoped she would call back and say it was a mistake, that she had realized how cruel she had been, that she couldn't imagine Christmas morning without my boys opening their stockings by the fireplace. But the phone didn't ring. Or rather, it did, but it was just a text from Delilah. "Hey, Mom said you're cool with the changes. Thanks for understanding. Joseph is so excited. His kids are. A lot, lol, but he's amazing. Maybe we can grab coffee in January." I stared at the screen. "Thanks for understanding." They assumed I was okay with it because I was always okay with it. I was Ava, the reliable one. Ava, the one who handled the estate when Dad died. Ava, the one who balanced the books, who organized the movers, who spent weeks on her knees scrubbing the grout in the old house so it would sell for top dollar, giving Aurora the nest egg she now lived on. I drove over to Aurora's condo on Thursday, ostensibly to drop off a casserole I had made, a habit I couldn't seem to break. I needed to see her face. I needed to see if she looked guilty. When she opened the door, she looked flushed and happy. The condo, usually immaculate, was strewn with catalogs for expensive men's watches and toys for young children. "Oh, Ava," she said, taking the casserole dish without really looking at me. "Perfect timing, I won't have to cook. Joseph is taking me and Delilah to look at new dining sets tonight. The old table, well, Joseph thinks it's a bit dated. We want something modern for the holiday." "The old table?" I asked, stepping into the foyer. "You mean the mahogany table Dad built, the one we ate every meal at for 30 years. She waved a hand dismissively. "It's heavy and dark. Joseph says we need light and air. We're going to," she paused, glancing at me with a sudden sharpness. "We're going to donate it, or put it on the curb. Unless you want to haul it away, I know you like that old junk." "I can't take it," I said quietly. "My house is full, my garage is full, of your things." Right, she murmured, already turning away. "Well, it has to go. Joseph needs the space." She didn't ask about the boys. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She was entirely consumed by the orbit of this new man and my sister's new life. I was an observer, a ghost in the doorway. As I walked back to my car, the winter wind biting at my cheeks, I realized something. She honestly believed that her history, her treasures, and her legacy were safe. She believed they were suspended in time, waiting for her to decide she wanted them back, preserved by my money and my effort. She thought she could discard the people, my children and me, while keeping the prestige of the family heirlooms I was protecting. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. The contract was in my name, and the auto-pay button was just a setting on a screen, easily toggled off. To understand the weight of what I was about to do, you have to understand what was in that storage unit. When my father died 12 years ago, Aurora fell apart. She couldn't handle the house, the memories, or the logistics. She wanted to downsize immediately to a sleek, modern condo downtown. But she refused, absolutely refused, to part with anything. "These are our memories, Ava," she had wailed, clutching a porcelain vase. "You can't sell them, we have to keep them for the future, for the grandchildren." The storage unit was a 10x20 climate-controlled vault. It held everything. It held my grandmother's sterling silver service for 12, wrapped in anti-tarnish cloth I had purchased myself. It held the hand-carved rocking chair my great-grandfather made. It held boxes upon boxes of my father's baseball card collection, thousands of cards, some from the 50s and 60s, that he had meticulously cataloged. He used to tell me, "Ava, this is your rainy day fund. If you ever get in trouble, these are worth a fortune." It held the antique oil paintings, the first editions of books, the crystal chandeliers she had taken down from the old house. For 11 years, the bill had come to me. At first, it was $200, then $250. Now, with inflation and rate hikes, it was $340 a month. Aurora never offered a dime. Whenever I brought it up, she would say, "Oh, Ava, you know I'm on a fixed income, and you have such a good job. Think of it as your contribution to the family heritage." My contribution. I had paid over $40,000 in storage fees over the last decade. I had paid it to keep her happy, to keep the peace, to preserve the legacy she claimed to cherish. But now there was Joseph. I met Joseph only once, briefly, a month prior. He was a man in his late 50s, slick in a way that made you check for your wallet after shaking his hand. He wore suits that were slightly too shiny and drove a leased luxury car he made sure to park in the center of the driveway. He was a consultant, a vague profession that seemed to involve a lot of phone calls and very little actual work. From the moment he entered the picture, Delilah, my younger sister, had morphed into a different person. Delilah had always been the golden child, flighty, artistic, irresponsible. She bounced between jobs and apartments, always bilayed out by Aurora. I didn't resent her for it, I loved her. But Joseph had tapped into something ugly in both of them. He had whispered in Aurora's ear that she deserved the best. He had convinced Delilah that they were a power couple. And he had looked at me, the supply chain analyst in the practical shoes, with a sneer of disdain. During that one meeting, he had asked me, "So, Ava, your mother tells me there's quite a hoard of antiques tucked away somewhere. You know, the market for silver is high right now. Shame to let it sit gathering dust." I had told him firmly, "It's not for sale, it's family history." He had laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "History doesn't pay the bills, sweetheart. Cash is king." Now he was measuring the dining room. Now he was the reason my children were crying because they couldn't see their grandmother. I sat at my kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The boys were asleep. I pulled up my banking app on my phone. I scrolled down to the recurring payments. Safekeep storage, $340. Next payment scheduled for tomorrow. I thought about the baseball cards. I thought about the silver. I thought about my father telling me they were a rainy day fund. Well, it was raining. I clicked on the transaction. I didn't just cancel the payment. I went to the storage facility's website, logged into the account I had managed for a decade, and updated the contact information. I removed my email address. I removed my phone number. I changed the billing address to Aurora's condo. I changed the emergency contact to Delilah's cell phone number. Then I canceled the auto pay. The lease agreement was clear. If payment was missed, they would send a notice to the address on file. If payment was not received within 60 days, the unit would be locked. After 90 days, the contents would be put up for public auction. Aurora threw away junk mail without opening it. She never answered calls from unknown numbers, and Delilah changed her phone number every 6 months to avoid creditors. I wasn't selling the history. I was simply handing the responsibility back to the owner. If she cared about it as much as she claimed, she would pay the bill. If she was too busy playing happy family with Joseph to open her mail, well, that was a decision, too. I pressed Save Changes. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in 3 days, the headache behind my left eye began to fade. Christmas morning arrived with a stillness I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't up at 5. 00 a.m. wrestling a 20-pound turkey into a roasting pan or vacuuming pine needles off the rug before Aurora arrived with her white glove inspection routine. Instead, my boys and I slept until 7. We made pancakes shaped like snowmen. We opened presents slowly, without the pressure of a schedule or the looming threat of criticism. It was peaceful, it was lovely, but beneath the calm, my mind was working with the cold precision of a forensic accountant. While the boys played with their new video games, I sat on the couch with my laptop, a mug of coffee steaming in my hand. I logged into the storage facility's payment portal. Status past due, account locked. Late fee applied, $45. I smiled, a tight, grim expression that didn't reach my eyes. I had set up email forwarding the week prior, ensuring that every frantic notification from Safekeep Storage bypassed my inbox and went straight to the digital trash. The physical letters, the ones printed on urgent red paper, were currently sitting in Aurora's mailbox at her condo. I knew exactly what she did with them. She had a basket by the door where junk mail went to die. She wouldn't open a letter unless it looked like a wedding invitation or a check. She certainly wouldn't open something that looked like a bill, especially not when she believed I was paying it. With the trap set and the clock ticking, I turned my attention to the variable in the equation I couldn't control: Joseph. A man who demands a traditional family Christmas, with people he's never met, who displaces children for his own comfort. RT, and who assesses the value of antique furniture within 5 minutes of entering a home isn't just new. He's a predator. I pulled up my professional toolkit. As a supply chain analyst, vetting vendors is my bread and butter. I know how to find the shell companies, the lawsuits, and the hidden debt behind a glossy corporate facade. Joseph was just another vendor who had failed the initial quality check. I started with the basics: social media. Delilah had tagged him in a photo from their perfect family Christmas. He was wearing a velvet blazer, holding a glass of scotch, looking every inch the wealthy patriarch. The caption read, "So blessed to have a real man leading this family. Blessed new beginnings." I zoomed in on the watch he was wearing. It looked like a Rolex Submariner. I took a screenshot and ran it through an image search. It was a knockoff, available on cheap import sites for $50. I dug deeper. I searched for Joseph Vansetti in the state business registry. He claimed to be a senior consultant for a firm called Vansetti Global. The search returned 0 results, no business license, no LLC. I switched to court records. It took me 3 hours and $40 in access fees, but I found him. It wasn't Vansetti Global. It was a string of small claims court judgments in 3 different counties: unpaid rent, a defaulted car loan, a lawsuit from a woman in 2019 for unreturned property. He wasn't a consultant. He was a drifter who moved from woman to woman, leveraging their credit scores until the wells ran dry. And now, he had found Aurora, a widow with a paid-off condo, a modest nest egg, and a daughter who was desperate for approval. The danger wasn't just that he was rude, it was that he was hungry. And he had already identified the hoard of antiques as his next meal. January bled into February. The silence from my mother and sister was deafening, broken only by social media posts showing them at expensive dinners or weekend getaways, always funded, I suspected, by Aurora's credit cards. Then the call came. It was Delilah. Her voice was pitched high, breathless with an excitement that sounded forced. "Ava, oh my God, you have to meet us. We're at the bistro downtown. Mom really wants to see you. We have big news." I knew what the news was. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. I agreed to meet them, grabbing a manila folder from my desk before I left. When I arrived at the restaurant, they were already seated at a booth in the back. Aurora looked tired, her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the circles under her eyes, but she beamed when she saw me. Joseph was sitting next to her, not Delilah, his arm draped possessively over the back of the booth. "Ava," Aurora cried out, waving me over. "Finally, we ordered you an iced tea." I sat down, placing the folder on the table. What's the news? Delilah held up her hand. A diamond ring, or what looked like one, glittered under the recessed lighting. We're getting married, Joseph proposed last night. It's going to be the event of the season, Joseph added, his voice smooth like oil. A June wedding, very exclusive. We're thinking of a vintage theme. That's fast, I said, keeping my face neutral. You've known each other for 4 months. When you know, Delilah said defensively. And, Aurora interjected, leaning forward, we need your help, Ava. Joseph's assets are currently tied up in international markets. It's a liquidity issue. We need to put the deposit down on the venue by Friday. I've maxed out my daily limit on the transfers. She looked at me with that familiar expectation. The expectation that I would fix it, that I would pull out my checkbook and smooth the road. You want me to pay for the wedding? I asked. Just the deposit, Aurora said. Joseph will pay you back with interest once his funds clear from Zurich. Zurich, I repeated. I looked at Joseph. He didn't blink. He held my gaze with the confidence of a sociopath. I opened the manila folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, a printout of a judgment from the county court, dated 18 months ago. Is your account in Zurich also where you keep the money for the $12,000 you owe to Apex Property Management for the eviction on 4th Street? I asked, sliding the paper across the table. The silence at the table was instantaneous and absolute. Aurora looked at the paper, then at Joseph. What is this? It's a public record, I said, my voice steady. Joseph isn't a consultant, Mom. He's unemployed. He has judgments against him in 3 counties for unpaid rent and credit card debt. He's not waiting for funds to clear. He's broke. I watched Joseph's face. For a second, the mask slipped. His eyes narrowed, cold and reptilian. But then he laughed, a loud, incredulous sound that made heads turn at nearby tables. Oh, Ava, he said, shaking his head with a pitying smile. You really are jealous, aren't you? This is exactly what I told you, Aurora. She can't stand to see Delilah happy. Jealous, I stared at him. It's a court document. It's identity theft, Joseph shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I've been fighting that for years. My identity was stolen by a hacker. How dare you bring this up now, on our celebration day? Aurora looked at the paper, then at Joseph's outraged face. She looked at me, her daughter who had paid her bills and managed her life for a decade. Then she looked at the man who had bought her nothing but compliments. Ava, take that back, Aurora whispered. It's a fact, Mom. I can't take back a fact. You are trying to ruin this family, Aurora hissed, her face flushing red. Because you're bitter, because you're alone, get out. Take your slander and get out. I stood up, I didn't fight. I didn't scream, I just looked at her. Okay, I said. But when he asks you to sell the antiques to pay for this wedding, don't say I didn't warn you. We don't need your permission for anything, Delilah shouted as I walked away. They had no idea how true that was. I didn't speak to them for the next 6 weeks. I blocked their numbers, but I didn't block the notifications from the storage unit. Day 75, final notice sent. Day 85, lien enforced. Unit scheduled for auction. Day 90, auction date confirmed. While I watched the countdown on my screen, Joseph was busy escalating his control. Through a mutual family friend, I heard the updates. Joseph had convinced Aurora to sell her car, a reliable sedan I had helped her buy, because public transport is more European. He had moved Delilah and her 3 step-kids-to-be into Aurora's 2-bedroom condo. The liquidity issue hadn't been resolved. And then I found the smoking gun. I hadn't stopped digging. The identity theft excuse gnawed at me. I expanded my search to neighboring states. I found a marriage license in Ohio from 5 years ago. Joseph Vanzetti to a woman named Margaret. No divorce record. I tracked Margaret down on social media. She was a nurse in Cleveland. I sent her a carefully worded message. Hi, I believe my sister is dating your husband, Joseph. Is there anything I should know? She called me within 10 minutes. She cried for 20. He wasn't just a debtor, he was a bigamist. He had walked out on her and their maxed out credit cards 3 years ago, disappearing into the ether. She sent me photos. Photos of him wearing the same fake Rolex. Photos of him holding a baby, his grandson, not his child. He didn't have custody of his kids because they were adults. The children he had brought to Christmas, they were likely nieces or nephews he had borrowed for sympathy, or perhaps children from yet another woman he was stringing along. I had everything I needed to send him to jail. But I needed the timing to be perfect. I needed Aurora to see it when she had absolutely nowhere left to turn. Then the email arrived. Safekeep Storage, Unit 402. Status, sold. Auction completed. Winning bid, $4,200. Account closed. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was done. The furniture, the silver, the baseball cards, my father's legacy, was gone. It had been sold to a stranger for pennies on the dollar because Aurora couldn't be bothered to open her mail. The loss was a physical blow, a sharp grief that took my breath away. I had failed my father. But then I remembered his voice, telling me the cards were a rainy day fund. He would have hated the stuff being sold, but he would have hated his wife being swindled even more. This was the price of the lesson. 2 days after the auction, my work phone rang. It was Aurora. She was calling my office line because she knew I couldn't block it. Ava, she said, her voice was strained, breathless. We need to talk. I'm working, Mom. It's an emergency, she said. Joseph has found a buyer, a private collector. He's willing to pay $50,000 for the baseball card collection alone, and another $20,000 for the silver. I closed my eyes. They were selling the air. They were counting money that didn't exist. Mom, I said, you don't have the baseball cards. Stop being difficult, she snapped. Joseph has already negotiated the deal. It solves everything. The wedding, the debts, everything. We're going to the storage unit on Saturday to meet the buyer. I need you to bring the key and the gate code. We can't find the spare. I can't do that, I said. If you don't show up, she threatened, her voice dropping to a low, ugly register I had never heard before, I will write you out of the will completely. I mean it, Ava. You won't get a single teaspoon. Saturday, I asked, my voice calm, almost gentle. Saturday, 10:00 a.m. Don't be late. I'll be there, I said, and I'll bring everything I have. She hung up, thinking she had won. She thought she was about to cash in on 11 years of my preservation efforts. She had no idea that she was walking into a graveyard. I printed out the chat logs with Margaret. I printed the marriage certificate. I printed the auction sold receipt. I put them all in a binder. The investigation was over. The trap had snapped shut. It was time to go look at the empty room. The morning of the showdown was overcast, the sky a bruised purple that threatened rain. I drove to the storage facility with a calmness that frightened me. Beside me on the passenger seat lay the binder, a paper tombstone for Joseph's charade. When I pulled into the gravel lot of Safekeep Storage, they were already there. Joseph was leaning against his leased sedan, checking his watch, looking agitated. Aurora was pacing, wringing her hands, dressed in her Sunday best as if meeting a collector required pearls. Delilah stood slightly apart, looking pale and nauseous. I parked my sensible SUV and stepped out. The air smelled of wet asphalt and impending disaster. You're late, Joseph barked, though I was 3 minutes early. The buyer is going to be here in 20 minutes. He's driving up from the city. Do you have the key? I have the key, I said, holding up the small brass key on a simple ring. Aurora rushed forward, her eyes wide and desperate. Thank God. Ava, please just open it. We need to get the baseball card boxes out and staged on the table near the front. Joseph says presentation is everything. Presentation, I repeated flatly. We walked to Unit 402. It was down a long, echoing corridor of corrugated metal doors. The sound of our footsteps was the only noise, Joseph's heavy tread, Aurora's clicking heels, and my silent sneakers. When we reached the door, Joseph stepped back, gesturing grandly. Do the honors, Ava. Let's get this gold mine open. I inserted the key into the cylinder lock. I turned it. Nothing happened. I jiggled it, it didn't turn. What are you doing? Joseph snapped. Open it. It doesn't work, I said, stepping back. Give it to me, he snarled, snatching the key from my hand. He jammed it in, twisting it violently, rattling the door. It's the wrong key. You brought the wrong key on purpose. It's the key I've used for 11 years, I said calmly. Maybe we should ask the manager. I don't have time for this, Joseph shouted, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. He pounded on the metal door. Open up. Just then, a golf cart whirred down the hallway. It was the facility manager, a burly man named Rick whom I had known for a decade. He slowed to a stop, looking at our group with confusion. Everything okay here? Rick asked, eyeing Joseph's aggression. This woman changed the lock, Joseph accused, pointing a trembling finger at me. We need into Unit 402 immediately. We have a buyer coming. Rick looked at me, then at the unit number. His expression shifted from confusion to pity. He looked at his clipboard. Unit 402? Rick asked. Folks, Unit 402 was auctioned off on Tuesday. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the hallway. What? Aurora whispered. Her voice was so small it barely carried over the hum of the ventilation system. Auctioned, Rick said, his voice gentle but firm. The account was 90 days past due. We followed standard protocol. Sent the notices, cut the lock, sold the contents to the highest bidder on Tuesday morning. The unit is empty. The new owner cleared it out yesterday. No, Aurora gasped, clutching her chest. No, that's impossible. Ava pays it. Ava always pays it. She turned to me, her eyes wide with horror and accusation. Tell him, Ava. Tell him you paid it. I stopped paying in November, I said, my voice steady, echoing off the metal walls. Right after you uninvited my children from Christmas. You stopped. Aurora staggered back, leaning against the door of Unit 403 for support. But the heirlooms, Daddy's cards, the silver. Sold, I said, for $4,200. 50,000, Joseph roared, stepping toward me, his hands balled into fists. Those cards were worth $50,000. You just cost us 50 grand, you spiteful, jealous little. Stop, I said, raising my voice for the first time. I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. Before you talk about what I cost you, let's talk about what you cost my sister. I opened the binder and pulled out the marriage license. Margaret Vansetti, I read aloud. Married 2018, still married. She lives in Ohio. She says you still owe her $12,000 in credit card debt. Joseph froze. The color drained from his face faster than the blood from a wound. Delilah, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. What did you say? He's married, Delilah, I said, handing her the paper. And the kids he brought to Christmas? Margaret says they're his nieces. He borrowed them. He doesn't have custody of anyone because he's a drifter. I pulled out the next document, the judgment for the unpaid. Rent, he's not a consultant, he's unemployed. He was going to take the money from the baseball cards, my father's legacy, and disappear, just like he did to Margaret. Joseph looked at the papers in Delilah's shaking hands. He looked at Rick, the burly manager who was now stepping out of the golf cart with his hand on his radio. He looked at me. You're crazy, Joseph stammered, backing away. She faked those, it's Photoshop. I verified it with the county clerk this morning, I said. And by the way, I called the police non-emergency line on my way here. They're interested in a chat about bigamy and fraud. They should be pulling into the lot right about now. As if on cue, the distant wail of a siren cut through the air outside. Joseph didn't argue. He didn't fight. He turned and ran. He sprinted down the hallway, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the concrete, abandoning his fiancée, his future mother-in-law, and the lie he had built. Delilah watched him go, the marriage license crumpling in her hand. She didn't chase him. She just slid down the wall until she was sitting on the dirty concrete floor, burying her face in her knees. Aurora was still staring at the empty unit door. "The silver," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "The china, it's all gone, all of it." "Yes, Mom," I said, feeling a tear slide down my own cheek. "It's gone, you chose him over us, and now you have neither." The fallout was catastrophic, swift, and entirely necessary. Joseph was apprehended 2 towns over, trying to pawn the watch I had identified as a fake. It turned out it was a good fake, worth maybe $200, but his panicked speeding attracted a state trooper. The subsequent investigation unraveled a web of petty scams across 3 states. He wouldn't be attending any exclusive vintage weddings anytime soon. He was looking at 3 to 5 years in a state penitentiary. Delilah was devastated, but the shock was a powerful antidote to her delusion. She spent 3 days on my couch, crying, drinking tea, and reading the messages from Margaret in Ohio. They actually bonded over their shared trauma. It was a strange, sad friendship, but it helped Delilah see that she wasn't the problem. She was just the latest target. She broke her lease on the apartment she couldn't afford and moved into a small studio. She started therapy. For the first time in her life, she was standing on her own 2 feet, wobbly but upright. Aurora took the hardest hit. The loss of the heirlooms broke something in her. She tried to track down the auction winner, desperate to buy back the baseball cards, but the buyer was a private LLC that didn't return calls. The rainy day fund my father had built was gone, dissolved into the ether of her own negligence. She blamed me for weeks. She left voicemail after voicemail, screaming that I was vindictive, that I was cruel, that I had stolen her memories. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I simply listened to one, then deleted the rest. Finally, about 2 months after the auction, she showed up at my door. She looked older, smaller. The grandeur she had worn like a cloak had frayed. "I brought the boys some Easter candy," she said, holding out a plastic bag. It wasn't the expensive chocolatier truffles she used to brag about buying. It was a bag of drugstore chocolate eggs. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, my table, the one I had paid for with my own salary. "I went to the condo," she said, staring at her hands. I looked in the basket by the door. The notices, they were there, all of them, the red ones, the certified letters. "I know," I said softly. "I thought," she swallowed hard, "I thought you would just always be there. I thought I could treat you however I wanted and you would still handle the storage unit. Because you're Ava, you're the strong one." "I am the strong one," I agreed, "but I'm not the doormat, not anymore." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with regret. "I lost everything, Ava, Daddy's things. They're gone." "No, Mom," I said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "The things are gone, the cardboard and the metal, but the memories, you have those, and you have your daughters. You almost lost us too." She broke down then, weeping with the raw, ugly sound of someone who realizes they have been the villain in their own story. We didn't fix everything that day. You don't undo 40 years of favoritism and neglect with one conversation. But we established new ground rules. I wasn't the bank. I wasn't the storage facility. I was her daughter, and I had conditions. The following Christmas was different. We hosted it at my house. Delilah brought a new boyfriend, a quiet guy who worked in it and seemed terrified of me, which I took as a good sign. Aurora didn't criticize my turkey. She sat on the floor and played with my sons, actually listening to them instead of waiting for her turn to SB. Weak. As I watched them, I thought about the storage unit. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had poured into that metal box, paying to preserve a past that was weighing us down. I realized then that letting it go was the best investment I had ever made. The empty space in that unit had created room for something else: respect, boundaries, and finally, peace. My father was right. It was a rainy day fund. I just spent it on freedom instead of cash.